Okay, let's unpack this. If you live anywhere in Canada, you feel it, right? Housing affordability isn't just some abstract topic, it's this massive, pressing issue we're all dealing with.
Absolutely.
And you've definitely heard the ambitious government targets aimed at trying to fix it. So today, we're taking a deep dive into a pretty interesting reality check on those very goals.
That's right. We're digging into a specific piece of analysis here. Insights from a TD Bank economist, Rishi Sondhi, and this was reported by the RM editorial team.
Right. And a quick shout out to Mandeep Toor of OMAXE Real Estate Inc. for flagging this one for us.
Good catch.
So, our mission in this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to really understand what this expert analysis is saying. Are those big headline housing targets actually achievable?
Yeah, and are they even necessary to fix affordability? At least according to this report.
Exactly. And what are the fundamental obstacles that are really standing in the way?
Well, the big number that gets thrown around a lot is the Prime Minister's ambition, Mark Carney's, aiming for scaling up Canadian housing completions to a staggering 500,000 per year.
500,000 a year.
Over the next decade. I mean, just think about that number for a second. It's a massive jump from where we are now.
It really is. Which, immediately brings us to the core tension this analysis points out. Because the TD economist basically questions if 500,000 new homes every single year are genuinely needed to restore affordability.
Right. And what's particularly interesting here is that the TD analysis offers a different take. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, 400,000 completions a year may do the trick. That's the actual phrase they use.
May do the trick.
To bring housing affordability back over time to where it was before the pandemic.
Okay, so the government's aiming for 500K, but this analysis from a major bank economist suggests 400K might be enough for that specific affordability goal.
Potentially, yes.
But, and this is a big but, even getting to that 400,000 number, well, the report flags some pretty fundamental hurdles. It calls even that 400,000 target lofty.
Yeah, lofty is a good word for it. This is where the analysis really kind of hits you with the reality of the situation. It points to these structural challenges deep within the industry itself.
Structural challenges, meaning?
Deep-seated issues that aren't quick or easy fixes. Primarily, they're talking about construction sector productivity, how efficiently we build, and a workforce that's facing, frankly, significant retirements.
Okay, and the numbers they use to illustrate this labor challenge, they're pretty stark, aren't they? What does the report say?
They are. The industry projections mentioned are quite significant. They estimate that by 2034, so just over a decade away, Canada's construction sector could be short. Get this, a projected 108,000 workers.
Wow, 108,000.
And that's after accounting for, people retiring and the general workforce needs.
Yeah. Okay, 108,000 workers short. So if we're trying to seriously ramp up building, the idea of just finding a massive wave of new workers, that's not really a viable path, according to this analysis.
Precisely. The report actually lays out the math quite clearly. To hit that 400,000 completions per year target within 10 years, assuming we don't miraculously get way more productive overnight.
Right, keeping productivity levels as they are.
Exactly. Canada's residential construction workforce, specifically the people building homes, would need to expand by something like 16% every single year.
16% annually.
Yeah, and the report calls that untenable, basically not feasible, especially when you consider how much of our total employment is already in construction. It's just not realistic growth.
And it's not just homes competing for these workers, is it? I mean, you've got massive infrastructure projects happening too.
Absolutely. That's a key point. Federal and provincial governments have huge plans for infrastructure things, roads, transit, utilities, and those projects need many of the exact same skilled trades.
So they're directly competing for the electricians, the plumbers, the framers.
Exactly. Direct competition for the very people needed to build houses.
Okay, so workforce expansion on its own looks unrealistic because of retirements, the scale needed, and this competition. What about the government policies we've already heard about? Things like cutting the GST on new builds or trying to reduce development charges. Do they help bridge the gap?
Well, the analysis looked at those kinds of policies, the ones meant to stimulate building. And the conclusion was pretty sobering. They're expected to fall well short.
Well, sure.
Yeah, well short of bridging that huge gap between where we are now averaging, about 210,000 completions annually, and that 500,000 goal the government mentioned. The structural constraints we talked about, the labor and productivity issues, they're just that significant. These policies help, but they don't solve the core problem.
Okay, let's circle back then to that 400,000 figure. If hitting 500,000 seems, highly improbable given these issues. Why does The Economist think 400,000 could potentially work for the affordability piece?
So the TD modeling suggests that if we could consistently achieve annual completions around 400,000 and sustain that over time,
Okay.
that could indeed be enough to gradually restore housing affordability back to its pre-pandemic level. It wouldn't be instant, but over time, it could work.
But there's a really critical assumption built into that modeling, isn't there? I remember reading that.
Yes, absolutely. A very important one. This whole projection hinges on Canada avoiding a major recession.
Right, because a recession would?
Well, yeah, the report acknowledges that a significant economic downturn would, of course, likely improve affordability faster, but obviously through a really painful process nobody wants.
No kidding.
So, assuming we stay on a relatively stable economic path, that's when the 400,000 number is presented as potentially sufficient for the affordability target alone.
Got it. And speaking of potential ways forward, solutions, the source does mention prefabricated housing. Is that seen as the game changer, the thing that could fix the productivity problem?
Prefabricated housing definitely comes up, and it certainly has potential because, building components or even whole modules in a factory setting can boost productivity quite a bit compared to traditional on-site building.
Makes sense. More controlled environment, assembly line.
Exactly. But the report is pretty realistic here. It says it's not a silver bullet, at least not right now. The current prefabricated housing sector in Canada is actually quite small.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So scaling it up to make a major difference, that's going to be a long-term effort. They point to international experience showing it takes time.
And are there specific reasons mentioned why scaling up prefab is tricky here in Canada?
Yes, a key hurdle they cite is the sheer variation in housing design codes and regulations, across different cities, different provinces.
The patchwork problem.
Exactly. This lack of standardization makes it really difficult for factories to just mass produce components or units efficiently for the whole country. Every region has slightly different rules they need to follow.
So even the promising ideas for improving how we build, like prefab, they have their own complex set of hurdles to clear. It's not simple.
Not at all. And that's what this analysis does so well, I think. It moves beyond just talking about targets, these big numbers, and it really dives into the nuts and bolts of why achieving them is so incredibly difficult. It points squarely at these deep practical limitations within the industry itself.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together for you listening. This deep dive into the TD Economist's analysis, it really gives us a crucial reality check on the housing situation. While the government is aiming for that big 500,000 new homes per year number,
Yeah, the headline grabber.
this report suggests maybe 400,000 might actually be enough to get affordability back to pre-pandemic levels. But, and it's a big but, provided we manage to steer clear of a major recession.
Right. But even reaching that 400,000 goal consistently faces these really significant headwinds. We're talking primarily about those deep structural constraints within the construction industry.
Things like improving how efficiently we actually build, the productivity piece.
Exactly. And maybe even more critically, dealing with a severe labor shortage that's projected to hit, 108,000 workers short by 2034. That's a huge gap.
And the report is pretty blunt. Just trying to magically grow the workforce isn't the answer on its own. To hit even the 400,000 target for residential building would need, an unsustainable 16% jump in workers every year.
Which is described as untenable.
Yeah, especially when you factor in all the competition for those same skilled workers from massive infrastructure projects.
And those policies already announced, the ones meant to stimulate building. While they might help a bit on the margins, they're expected to fall significantly short of closing that massive gap between where we are building now, around 210,000 units, and those really ambitious targets.
And even potential solutions like prefabricated housing, while promising for productivity down the road, face their own hurdles in scaling up right now, partly because of things like all the different local building codes across the country.
It's a complex web.
It really is. So the path to significantly boosting housing supply isn't just about setting a big goal number. It's really tangled up in these fundamental industry realities. Given all these structural constraints highlighted in the analysis, especially the labor shortages and the real challenge of improving productivity, It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Hmm.
What does this suggest about the most effective levers policymakers actually have? If they genuinely hope to make a meaningful impact on housing supply, maybe the focus needs to shift, perhaps more fundamentally, away from just announcing targets and more towards aggressively tackling these root industry limitations themselves. And how long might that realistically